What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Thursday, March 3rd. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 7-game slate here tonight. We had some good picks going on yesterday. Our studs came through. Some of the more risky picks, they didn't come through, but they were high risk, high reward. So let's get into the point guard position. I like Ja Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing point guards. Ja Morant has averaged 47.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 34% usage rate. Now, I think he can score 50 fantasy points or more here tonight, get you 5 times value or more. He's 10,200 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 224 points scored in this game. And Ja Morant has scored 64, 57, and 41 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 36, and 34 minutes. And Ja Morant has scored 48 and 57 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Celtics. So I think he's got some pretty good upside in this match out. He's turning out to be a pretty decent stud. So I like Ja Morant here versus the Boston Celtics. Now, if you want to save some salary at the point guard position, Russell Westbrook is looking pretty cheap at 8,200 8,200 DraftKings salary and 1,200 less on FanDuel. So that's a 7K Russell Westbrook on FanDuel. I mean, he scored 38 fantasy points last game, played 38 minutes. He's projected at 40 fantasy points here tonight, which is 5 times value on DraftKings and which would crush value on FanDuel. So I think Russell Westbrook on FanDuel is a pretty good play. Even on DraftKings, he's pretty decent play, but smash play on FanDuel for that price. Tons of upside at $7,000 FanDuel salary. He could get you 50 plus fantasy points pretty easily if he gets going. But if you want to save some salary at the point guard position, take a look at Spencer Dinwiddie from the Dallas Mavericks playing the Golden State Warriors, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing point guards. Spencer Dinwiddie has averaged 28.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate. He's projected at 27.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's just about 5 times value. He's 5,600 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 219 points scored in this game. And Spencer Dinwiddie has scored 31, 39, and 29 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 24, 31, and 25 minutes. So I like his price tag. I think he's got some pretty good upside at only 5,600 DraftKings salary. He scored 39 fantasy points in his last game versus the Warriors. So I like Spencer Dinwiddie here versus the Golden State Warriors. Now, if you're looking to save a bunch of salary, this would be a DraftKings play only. And he isn't playing a ton of minutes, but he has been pretty productive the past 3 games. Just take a look at Lonnie Walker from the San Antonio Spurs playing the Sacramento Kings, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Lonnie Walker has scored 30, 27, and 29 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 25, 23, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 22.3 fantasy points here tonight, which is just about 5 times value. So he's gotten you over 5 times value the past 3 games. Actually, the past 5 games. Lonnie Walker has scored 30, 27, 29, 29, and 33 fantasy points in his last 5 games. So he's been on fire, and he's still only 4,600 DraftKings salary. So he doesn't need much. Yeah, I mean, he only needs his 22.5 fantasy points to get you 5 times value. But he is 1,200 more on FanDuel, so this would be a DraftKings value play. And I like this pick because Vegas thinks there's going to be 237.5 points scored in this game. Super high scoring game and a great matchup. So a nice way to get some low salary exposure to this high scoring game from a player that's been pretty hot the past 5 games. So I like Lonnie Walker as a value play on DraftKings here versus the Sacramento Kings.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like Zach LaVine from the Chicago Bulls playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 10th worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Zach LaVine has averaged 39.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 29% usage rate. Now, he's only projected at 36.3 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 40 fantasy points or more and get you 5 times value or more. And remember, this guy's got 50 plus fantasy point upside, and he's only 8,000 DraftKings salary. He's 300 less on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 231 points scored in this game. So good matchup, high scoring game, low price tag, and Zach LaVine has scored 33, 44, and 31 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 38, and 35 minutes. Now, in his last 4 games versus the Hawks, he scored 31, 36, 52, and 70 fantasy points. So you see he's got that 50 plus fantasy point upside at only 8,000 DraftKings salary and 7,700 on FanDuel. I think this is a pretty good opportunity. So I like Zach LaVine here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Scotty Barnes from the Toronto Raptors playing the Detroit Pistons. And if I can remember right, the last time I picked Scotty Barnes, I think it was his 12 fantasy point performance in 21 minutes, but then he followed up that game with a 66 fantasy point performance in 34 minutes and then 41 fantasy points in 41 minutes. So you can see this guy's got some pretty monster upside. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick him again here tonight from the Toronto Raptors playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Scotty Barnes has averaged 32.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. He's projected at 31.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 6,400 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. So I like Scotty Barnes here versus the Detroit Pistons.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports You can try the position optimizer where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new player trends tool where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. So I got a handful of players here at the power forward position. Well, not a handful, I got 3. I guess a handful would be 5, but 3's a handful. So I like Keldon Johnson, Carmelo Anthony, and Danilo Gallinari. These guys are in the 5K salary range on both sites. Now, if I were to pick one, probably be Keldon Johnson from the San Antonio Spurs playing the Sacramento Kings, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Keldon Johnson has averaged 28.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 30.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. He's 5,800 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel. And the reason I'd pick Keldon Johnson is because we got this super high scoring game here, 237.5 points. So this is a good game to stack. Keldon Johnson has scored 27 and 46 fantasy points in his last 2 games, playing 29 and 46 minutes. He's also scored 37 and 38 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Kings. So I like Keldon Johnson here versus the Sacramento Kings. But now if you do need to save some salary, let's say you can't afford that 5,800 price tag, you need to come down a little bit. Take a look at Carmelo Anthony, who's 5,300 DraftKings salary. He's been playing pretty well for the Lakers, scoring 35, 23, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 29, and 28 minutes. So he's got that 30-plus fantasy point upside. And if you need to save even more salary at 5,100 DraftKings salary and only 5K on FanDuel, also in a high-scoring game here, take a look at Danilo Gallinari. Now, he's playing a bunch of minutes, so that's what I like about this pick. I think he's got some 30-plus fantasy point upside. Even though he hasn't played that well the past 3 games, he scored 26, 18, and 38 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 30, and 34 minutes. So you can see that 38 fantasy points, that's the game that you're looking for. But he is playing a bunch of minutes, 30 to 35 minutes in the last 3 games. And so he only needs about 25 fantasy points to get you 5 times value or more. So if he can play 30 plus minutes, get you 30 plus fantasy points, you will crush value. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 231 points scored in this game. So another high-scoring game that I'd like to get a piece of. So I like Danilo Gallinari here versus the Chicago Bulls. Okay, moving on to the center position. There's nothing I really love at the center position. Now, Steven Adams is playing really well. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, scored 38, 50, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 34, and 27 minutes. But he also could be a letdown player, although he is playing well recently, so I think he's a fine play. You got Clint Capella at 5,900 DraftKings salary in that high-scoring game from the Atlanta Hawks versus the Chicago Bulls. But he's another guy that sometimes going to put up 20 to 25 points and sometimes will put up 35 to 40 fantasy points. So he's only 5,900 DraftKings salary. He's projected at 31.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. So I think his price tag is low enough where I could justify playing some Clint Capella because he is averaging 32.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game, coming in at 1.17 fantasy points per minute. So I think he's a pretty decent play on DraftKings with that low price tag. But if you are looking to save a bunch of salary, this would be a DraftKings play only. And this would just be a value play. Like he's eligible at power forward and at the center position. He's not playing a ton of minutes, but he's been surprisingly productive the past 3 games. And he's got some good player versus team history here and a good matchup. So this is a high risk, high reward value play, DraftKings only. But take a look at Robert Covington from the LA Clippers playing the LA Lakers, who have the 5th worst defense overall, give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing centers, also eligible at the power forward position. And Robert Covington has averaged 22.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 13% usage rate. So I think he can score 24 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more. He's 4,200 DraftKings salary, but he's 900 more on FanDuel, so I'm not going to be playing him on FanDuel. And Robert Covington has scored 26, 25, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 21, 24, and 20 minutes. So the problem here is that he is limited in minutes, but he's been productive. So if you're in a pinch for a value play, he's dual position eligible, so you could fit him into the power forward or the center position at only 4,200. I think he's worth a look. And another guy in the same boat on DraftKings only is Precious Achiuwa at only 3,900 DraftKings salary. Now, he was a flop last game, only scored 12 fantasy points in 17 minutes, but he scored 37 fantasy points in both of the games before that, playing 23 and 30 minutes. He's projected at 20.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. And actually, that's exactly his season average, 20.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game. So he's super cheap on DraftKings, and he's a guy that can go out there and get the job done for you as well. So if you're looking for those value plays on DraftKings, I like Precious Achiuwa, and I like Robert Covington.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.